All right, welcome back. So now we're going to talk about actually submitting an offer on a note that you're interested in buying. So obviously the first thing you're going to need to do after you've done your filtering is figure out what price you're going to offer. So you're going to want to have an REO calculator, or sorry, REO, an ROI calculator. I've got two different ones. I've got one I use for performing notes, one that I use for non-performing. Generally, people tend to build their own for these. These are a little bit hard to find in general. And the other thing I like to do too is once I come up with my price, I like to know if there are any seller expectations. So usually if a seller is sending me a tape, I'll ask them if they give me a rough idea what their expectations are. Sometimes if you're bidding off of a site like PaperStack or No Trade X or something like that, they may have a list price offered. So when I do offer a price, I want to make sure it's at least in the ballpark of what the seller expects. Sometimes I run notes through my system and the price that I come up with is way, way lower than what the seller wants. It could be just we're using a different valuation method. Sometimes sellers have unrealistic expectations, but I would urge you not to send in lowball offers and see what happens. I get these all the time when I list notes for sale, and it's really annoying. And when I get these from people, I have a tendency just to kind of write them off and in my head tag them as somebody that's just not serious. So, if somebody's listing a note for sale and they're asking for $30,000, don't offer $15,000 for that because they're going to say no. They're going to be annoyed. Nothing good's going to come out of it. I'm not aware of a scenario where someone listed a note at some really high price and then somebody made a lowball offer and the seller said, okay, great, let's go do that. So there's not much to gain there. I would try to stay away from that. And number two is when you submit your offer. So you're going to email the seller or put it in through the platform. You're going to have your price for the note. Sometimes if you're bidding on a single asset, you can just put in the email, hey, I'm offering this much for this note. A lot of times what I do is copy paste out of a spreadsheet if I'm all making an offer on a number of notes. And then I like to state the assumptions that are behind this. So if there were delinquent taxes that I found, a lot of times I'll note that, hey, my offer factors in the fact that there are whatever, $1,500 of delinquent taxes. If I didn't check the taxes for some reason, I might say that, hey, I didn't check the delinquent taxes, but if any show up, I expect to net those out of the price. And then it kind of goes without saying, but you, I don't generally do this, but you could mention too, like say, hey, if there are any other liens that show up against the property, I would expect those to be netted out of the price. And if your offer is really contingent on BPO value, so maybe it's one where there's not a lot of equity or the loan's even upside down, that it may be a foreclosure where the value of the property is really what's going to determine your ROI. Remember that we're the value we're going in assuming is just kind of based on what we find online through Zillow, Realtor.com, Trulia, that sort of thing, and the Google images, which are old. You might want to state that, hey, my offer is contingent on the BPO value being X number of dollars, and doing that sets you up for later if you come to find out the property is not in the condition you thought, or the value is less. Maybe you need to cancel your bid, or you need to fade your bid, fading being adjusting your price downward. Then it makes it easy to go back and say, hey, I made this offer on the assumption that the BPO value was at least 80,000. Now I've got this BPO from a realtor. They say it's worth only 60, so I need to make this change. It's always good to just state those things up front. Sometimes if it's a performing loan, sometimes these things take a little bit of time to get offers accepted and closed. It's perfectly fine to say, hey, I'm making an offer on this performing loan, and it's contingent on the borrower not missing any payments between when we make our agreement and when we close. I mean, you would hate to have a loan be performing and then right before you buy it, the borrower has a miss or something goes wacky. And then also like to state my closing time frame. So generally, I'm going to close, you know, sometimes faster than most, but say, hey, I'm going to be able to close this in 2 weeks' time. It kind of lets the seller know that you're serious and you have your processes thought through and sets the expectations. Now, negotiating, most offers don't get accepted. So I haven't really been keeping track of stats lately, but At one point, I was getting about 10 to 15% of my offers accepted. And that's for a variety of reasons. Sometimes the sellers already sold the loans to someone else. Sometimes they just want a really high price that's not really going to make any sense. Or, sometimes it can be a variety of things. So when an offer doesn't get accepted, don't worry about that too much. That's kind of the norm. Most of them don't. That's why I like to try to go a little faster in the pre-bid process. But just know it's not uncommon to get counter offers, or I've had a lot where I make an offer, the borrower makes a counter offer, I make a re-counter offer, and sometimes you go back and forth. Usually you're arriving at a price in one or two exchanges. But yeah, sometimes you get going back and forth more, and that's kind of normal to do. It's like anything else. And point number four here, though, is while maybe going back and forth on offers is kind of normal, if you get a good deal, take it. And what I mean by this is I've had some situations where I was selling a note and was going back and forth with the buyer, and they were trying to chisel me out of a small amount of money, and then somebody came along and made a much better offer. At which point I took the better offer. So I've seen some scenarios where people have lost deals by trying to optimize and get that last $100 or whatever on it. If you got something that's a note you really want and it's a good deal, I mean, by all means negotiate, but at the same time, lock that sucker down and don't drag things out. If you drag things out, you're just opening the potential for things to go wrong and for you to lose the deal. The next one is to be responsive, right? So when you submit an offer, or the borrower, or I'm sorry, or the seller submits a counteroffer, make sure you're responding at least definitely within a business day, and hopefully faster than that, right? One of the things you're doing through this whole process is building your reputation as a buyer. So sellers don't want to deal with people that take days to respond to simple things, right? You want to be known as the person who's gonna get things closed and execute. And so your responsiveness and communication is kind of an indication of that. And the last thing I'll tell you is that, when you do submit that first offer, it's kind of always scary. I remember submitting my first one, and I was really paranoid because I'm like, I'm submitting this offer. I've never done this before. I wasn't that sure about pricing at the time. And I was like, oh man, my worst nightmare is the seller snap responds and accepts, because if he does that, then I know that I've offered too much. So don't worry about that. That kind of thing is normal, right? I mean, you're going to do your homework before you put your offer in, but those kind of jitters on the first one are sort of normal. But trust me, you'll get to a point where you've put in hundreds and hundreds of offers, and you do these all the time without blinking an eye. So yeah, it's scary at first. Just remember, you're going to get past that. It's going to be okay. So if you'd like more information on notes, please visit me at www.fusionnotes.com, or subscribe to the YouTube channel where you can learn a lot more about how to buy notes. Thanks.